What if an ordinary building suddenly turns into an endless labyrinth? Today I'll tell you 5 true stories of people who got lost in places that seem straight out of the backrooms. This isn't fiction. This is all true.
The Paris Catacombs, France. Beneath the city lie over 300 kilometers of tunnels, but not everyone knows where they lead. Paris is a city of light, love, and art, but deep beneath its bustling streets lies an entirely different world, a city of the dead, an endless labyrinth of bone and darkness. These tunnels, remnants of ancient quarries, became the final resting place for the remains of over 6 million people in the late 18th century. Officially, only a tiny, safe portion of the catacombs is open to tourists, but a whole subculture of cataphiles, explorers who illegally enter the forbidden, unmapped sections, exists. For them, it's an adventure, but sometimes the adventure turns into a nightmare. In June 2017, 2 teenagers, aged 16 and 17, decided to test their fate. They descended into the labyrinth with only flashlights and a vague idea of the route. At first, everything went according to plan. They explored narrow passages, their walls neatly lined with human skulls and femurs, creating macabre patterns. The damp, cold air was thick with the smell of wet earth and eternity. But after a few hours, they realized they were lost. Every turn led to an identical corridor. Every passage branched into 2 or 3 new ones, and they all looked exactly the same. Their flashlights began to dim. Panic, cold and clammy, started to set in. They shouted, but the only response was a hollow echo that died in the endless passages. Time lost all meaning. Was it night or day? How long had they been there? Hours or days? The temperature underground held steady at around 15 degrees Celsius, 59 degrees Fahrenheit, and without warm clothing, the cold chilled them to the bone. Their water ran out quickly. They began to suffer from dehydration and hypothermia. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the sound of dripping water from the ceiling and their own ragged breathing. The labyrinth was no longer just a place. It became a living entity, toying with them, refusing to let them go. After 3 long days, when hope had nearly faded, they were accidentally discovered by a search party with specially trained dogs. The teenagers were found in a state of severe shock and hypothermia. They survived, but the experience left an indelible mark on them. They had been to a place where the line between reality and nightmare blurs. Because in the Paris catacombs, if you make a wrong turn, you can walk for hours and never find a way out.
The abandoned schools of Detroit, USA. Imagine long hallways, lockers, the smell of dust, and then suddenly you realize you don't know where the exit is. Detroit, once the heart of the American auto industry, is now known for its ghosts, thousands of abandoned buildings, silent witnesses to a bygone era. Among them, schools hold a special place. Huge complexes, designed for thousands of students, now stand empty, having become popular spots for urban explorers. But these buildings are deceptive. Their seemingly simple layouts can become deadly traps. In 2014, a group of 4 teenagers decided to explore one such school, Cass Tech High School, a giant 8-story building abandoned many years prior. They entered late in the evening, armed only with their phone flashlights. The first few hours were filled with adrenaline. They wandered through echoing hallways, peered into classrooms where chalk marks were still visible on blackboards and old textbooks littered the floor. They climbed to the auditorium with its torn curtain and the gym where remnants of basketball hoops hung from the backboards. The building felt like a giant playground. But when they decided to leave, the trouble began. They went down to the first floor but couldn't find the exit they had entered through. All the doors were boarded up or blocked with debris. They tried another corridor, but it led to a dead end, a collapsed staircase. The school, which had seemed so straightforward, began to transform into a maze. Each floor looked just like the one before. The same rows of lockers, the same identical classroom doors. Their phones, used as flashlights, started to die. Soon, they were left in near total darkness. The night outside made the windows useless. Panic grew. The building, which seemed merely abandoned by day, came alive at night. Every creak, every gust of wind sounded like the footsteps of a stranger. They began to shout, but their voices were swallowed by the vast, empty space. They ran up and down dark stairwells, desperately pulling on every door, but it was all in vain. 6 hours passed. 6 hours of terror and despair in a concrete box. Only in the morning, as the first rays of sunlight began to filter through the dirty windows, did they manage to find an unlocked door in the basement that led outside. They emerged exhausted, frightened, and covered in dust. Their fun adventure had turned into a lesson on how easy it is to get lost where everything feels familiar. Buildings designed for learning become traps.
The Pripyat Hospital, Ukraine. In this building, doctors saved lives. Now the corridors are silent. Medical Sanitary Unit 126 in Pripyat is one of the most sinister and famous locations in the Chernobyl exclusion zone. On the night of the 1986 disaster, the first responders, firefighters who received fatal doses of radiation, were brought here. Their contaminated clothing is still stored in the basement, making it one of the most dangerous places on Earth. Today, the hospital is a huge, dilapidated building that attracts stalkers and explorers from all over the world. But its standard Soviet layout, designed for efficiency, conceals another danger: the danger of getting lost. One Ukrainian urban explorer, known online as Ghost, shared a story that has become a legend among zone explorers. He went to the hospital alone, a violation of all safety rules. His goal was to photograph the infamous basement. He successfully descended, took a few pictures, and decided to go back up. And that's when the nightmare began. The staircase he had used seemed to have vanished. He walked into a hallway, but didn't recognize it. All the doors were identical. All the corridors were long, dimly lit by light from windows overgrown with trees. He tried going up a floor, thinking he could get his bearings there. But the second floor was an exact copy of the first, and so was the third. Endless rows of wards with rusty beds, treatment rooms with scattered equipment, operating theaters with tables covered in a thick layer of dust. Time passed. His dosimeter beeped periodically, a reminder of the invisible threat. But the building itself was becoming a far greater threat. He started leaving marks, scratching the walls to avoid walking in circles, but soon realized he had passed his own marks several times. The building seemed to be playing with him, changing its structure. He spent more than a day in the hospital. He ran out of water. Hunger and fatigue mixed with a growing terror. He was trapped in the heart of a dead city. He found a way out by chance. In desperation, he broke a window on the first floor and climbed out, cutting his hand in the process. He was saved, but the story of his wandering through the labyrinthine hospital became a warning to all who underestimate these places. In Pripyat, it's easy to forget where you are. Hashima Island, an entire island city abandoned in the 70s, but inside, the buildings still stand. Hashima Island, or Gunkanjima, Battleship Island is a concrete monster adrift in the sea off the coast of Nagasaki. It was once the most densely populated place on Earth, a coal mining city built on a tiny rocky outcrop. In 1974, the coal ran out, and the island was abandoned in a matter of weeks. People left everything behind, and Hashima became a ghost town, frozen in time. Today, it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, but access is restricted to a small, safe area. However, some daredevils illegally ventured deep into the island's residential blocks. And it's there that they encounter a unique form of liminal space. Two Japanese extreme photographers decided to explore the famous Block 65, one of the first multi-story concrete buildings in Japan. They landed on the island at night by boat and made their way inside. The building was a true vertical labyrinth, 9 floors, hundreds of tiny apartments, connected by narrow corridors and countless staircases. The problem was that everything was absolutely identical. Each apartment was a mirror image of its neighbor. Each floor was a copy of the one below. They climbed higher and higher, photographing the furniture, children's toys, and kitchen utensils left behind, ghosts of a past life. When they decided to head back, they couldn't find the right staircase. All the stairwells looked identical. They would descend a floor, enter a hallway, but it wouldn't lead to the exit. They would go back up and try another route, only to find themselves trapped again in a maze of concrete and emptiness. All around them was the ocean. The sound of waves crashing against the seawall was the only noise, and it only emphasized their complete isolation. They weren't just trapped in a building, they were trapped on an island in the middle of the sea. The sun began to rise, but the light brought no relief. It only highlighted the endless repetition of their prison. Only after several hours of panicked wandering did they spot a unique piece of graffiti on a wall they had photographed on their way in, which finally allowed them to get their bearings. The experience taught them that when an entire space is uniform, it becomes infinite.
The underground mall in Seoul, South Korea. Thousands of shops, hundreds of identical corridors, and almost no one knows the complete layout. Liminal spaces are not always about abandonment and decay. Sometimes the most terrifying labyrinth can be hidden in a modern, bustling, brightly lit place. A perfect example is COEX Mall in Seoul, one of the largest underground shopping centers in the world. It's a veritable city beneath a city, with hundreds of shops, movie theaters, an aquarium, and countless corridors connecting subway stations and exhibition halls. And in this man-made consumer paradise, it's incredibly easy to get lost. In 2011, a group of exchange students from Europe decided to spend a day at COEX. They were amazed by its scale and futuristic design. But after a few hours of shopping and visiting an exhibition, they realized they couldn't find the exit to their subway station. They followed the signs, but the signs seemed to contradict one another. Every corridor was bathed in bright artificial light, and the shop windows created an endless repeating pattern. The lack of windows or any landmarks connecting to the outside world began to cause disorientation. They asked shopkeepers for directions, but they only pointed in a general direction that led them back into the maze of identical passages. What started as a fun adventure began to turn into a source of frustration and quiet panic. They were surrounded by thousands of people, yet they felt completely lost. Music was playing, fountains were running, people were laughing, but for them, it all became background noise to their personal nightmare. They wandered through the underground complex for nearly 3 hours.
3 hours in a sterile, air-conditioned hell where every turn didn't bring them closer to their goal, but only pulled them deeper into the loop. Eventually, a security guard helped them, literally leading them by the hand through service corridors to the correct exit. This story proves that even active modern buildings can turn into backrooms, where the main threat isn't monsters or ghosts, but the architecture itself designed to disorient. All of these stories are real. They prove that liminal spaces are not just about aesthetics. Sometimes ordinary buildings can truly become labyrinths. And most importantly, no one can guarantee that you will find your way out.